you find like them betting in with any particular terrain features or cover or visuals? Like, is there anything? Because like, obviously, like when you look at like some of these thermal hubs, you have these points of the ridges that are coming out. Do you find it where they traditionally are betting out on those points, or do you think they're betting more with cover? If there's cover out there, that's great. Or like that they might be back in towards the draws a little bit, that might be choked with some more, mountain laurel or thicker stuff. Like what do you find in kind of a trend with that?
Honestly, not really very much of a trend. They do like those secondary points. If they can get on those to bet on, and by secondary point, I'm not talking about a huge ridge that has another secondary point. It may just be if you go up into one of these V-shaped ranges and it splits off, there's normally a ridge that it's a small ridge. It just may look like a round area, and they'll usually bed right up on the end of that. Like that's a preferred area. Now, if it has nothing, if it's bald, it has nothing, just trees, they're going to find somewhere that they can hide that's going to be adjacent to it. Blowdowns are really good. Like if you can get an old blowdown tree, stump, or something like that, they'll find that. They'll bed near that because they can use that as back cover or even front cover, But yeah, as far as terrain goes, when you split those micro drainages, usually you'll have that little rise, and they'll usually bed right there, And what I've actually anecdotally I guess by my own anecdotal work is what I've noticed is when I work into these areas, like if I'm going during season to go check trail cameras, I find myself walking up these drainages the same way. And the last couple of years when I've been walking up them, I've always seems like I'm bumping a mature buck, or not even mature bucks, but bucks in general that are just like, they're not bedding in those drainages, those V-shaped drainages midday, but they're just staging in them, like they're just hanging out feeding in them. So I'm constantly finding them in that area, and that just seems to be something that they may not have an area that they're particularly bedding in, but that just seems like a focal point that they're just kind of hanging around in. So they may be bedding nearby, dropping down into those V-shaped drainages because they're steep, and they usually have red oaks, white oaks. They're usually around here chock full of soft mass and stuff like that. So it's easy access for food,
Yeah. Yeah. And too, like, I feel like with bedding, it's like more times than not, I'm not looking at these big ridges that are coming out as I kind of used to, as far as with them bedding out along the edge of it, that you always hear traditionally that's where they're going to bed at. Now they might, but I feel like cover has more of a play to it in the areas that I've hunted than the wind does. Like, for example, there's a place that I know of, that this beautiful point that comes out would look like there's a nice drop off, great visual. It's perfect for them. But it's wide open. But on the other side, which is actually the south side of that, and which way the historical predominant wind direction is actually coming from the southwest, so it'd be almost the windward side, but it has some mountain laurel, but it's kind of like where it's scattered mountain laurel a little bit. And I found this little knob, so I actually found it, and I know you did a post about this, like with using Spartan Forge and the other mapping applications to look at using the excuse me, I'm losing my train of thought here, but the slope angle, and finding the little knobs that are kind of in those places, little high spots that are within something else. Sometimes that is all that it takes for a buck to feel comfortable, because they're not reading the rule books that we put out there or we talk about. They're just trying to find those places that give that sort of advantage. And for me, it was like, okay, they want cover, they want smell, and they want sight. Now they can't always have all three of them, but they always like to have at least two, it seems like.
Yeah.
And so it depends on how that all lays out. But I look for those micro things, and that's why I love slope angle, because like I've read topography my entire life. My dad was always huge on reading maps and going through and looking at it, but I find these now, slope angle just makes it quicker. It just pops out. You see red all around, and then you see a yellow or a spot that doesn't have any color shading to it, and it's just a small little dip. It's like, all right, there's a flat spot that's within all of this steeper terrain.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, any of those, they're like you said, they're not looking for the does will bed and the younger bucks will bed on those bigger knobs and secondary ridge points and stuff like that. And especially during the rut, you start looking at you find those, and then you're looking for the areas that the buck would bed nearby. And that's what that's the main thing is then look, let's say you got a ridge point, got two secondary ridges and they look really promising, but there's nothing really around them that's cover based or anything like that. Then you're looking down. I'm looking for the downwind closest area that has like you're saying, something smaller with steep terrain. So if once I see that red or that orange that's really steep terrain, then I'm looking for a area in that area, nearby that offers something, a terrain change with that steep terrain close by. So that's how you use how I use the secondary points, especially during the rut, is to think, well, that's where the does are probably going to be bedded at. What's the closest steep terrain to that would offer him cover and an escape, position, basically.
Yeah. And before I have a couple other questions based around wind and food, but the one thing I want to know if you consider this what would be thermal hub. So I don't see these a lot in Pennsylvania, but when I was hunting in West Virginia, there's a lot of them, and it was a concentration of bucks in these particular areas. And I learned it from a local guy, Josh Ilderton, is a friend of mine, that where basically you get like these U shapes, but there's not like ridges that pop out. It's just literally like kind of flat walls that come out, and in the bottom there'll be like a flat bench that a lot of times are kind of open, but it still kind of has a thermal pull that comes down to it. And it just seems like those areas, sometimes they might be grassy and brushy and everything in there, but it seems like that is a hub for those bucks to be at.
Yeah, yeah, and then sometimes the hubs and stuff like that. You're talking about on the mountain itself, like a bench.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and we see them here. And a lot of times, what affects that in the area that I am is in the ridges we don't see a lot of benches and stuff like that in this area. But what we'll find is rocky outcroppings. Like you'll be walking up the side of a ridge or up a secondary point or up a main ridge itself, and you'll come to like a rocky outcropping, and the trees are blown down. It may kind of level off a little bit, just a little less steeper terrain, but it's got steep terrain, surrounding it. So it's just like a bubble around it. And yeah, those are focal points too here. Like I drop a lot of cameras in those, and man, they seem to be. They're usually down here. They're filled with sparkleberry. It'll have blown down trees and stuff like that. Man, yeah, if you can, that's another really good point. And the wind flows differently in those areas. You get more of a when you get the higher tree terrain around you, you kind of got that band that's like doesn't have very many trees. What you get is a Venturi effect, where that wind speeds up right in that area. And so it's almost like a little safe haven. That's the way I look at it. It's like a safe zone for them to kind of stage and hang out.